Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to our continuing segment here at this particular convention, the South Island Autumn Leaves Convention held here in Christchurch. And we're continuing part 2 with the series on the French Revolution repeats itself. We looked at a number of things in the past relating to certain trends and developments that led up to and including the epochal event of the revolution itself. That was by no means an in-depth, comprehensive coverage of what transpired in those days, but we did cover a few little points here and there that we can see being reflected in our day in the 21st century. And before we proceed into part 2 to look at the repetition of those trends and developments in our world in which we live, I think it will be appropriate for us if we bowed our heads for a word of prayer. Our gracious kind Heavenly Father, we come before Thee now to thank You for this time that we can be gathered together, and we pray that You'll bless us with the aid of Your Holy Spirit as we look at these events, these developments, these trends, and we pray that we may also take note of the significance of the signs of the times that are unfolding before our eyes, and we may do all what we can, Father, to prepare ourselves for Thy soon coming, for the better world of tomorrow, and to be able to see these harbingers of Your coming with gladness and joy. We pray these things, dear Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. We're living in an age of revolution. I guess there's always been revolutions of one type or another down through the centuries of time, but particularly within our own lifespans, depending how long you live, how old you are, we have seen quite a change of events that have taken place in the world today. But we're going to narrow our focus to the 3 or 4 particular points that we had covered in part 1 of our presentation. We looked at the economy that was unfolding in France that had brought about a deprivation of circumstances to the people there, to the great masses of the population. And this in turn is having an effect upon our economy and upon the economy of the entire world. We're living still in the effects of the global economic crisis. May not have hit us so hard here in the South Pacific as in the rest of the world, but much of the world is suffering from the effects of the global downturn a number of years ago. Last October, there was a report that came out in the British newspaper called The Guardian, published in London, October the 13th, 2015. And the opening segment of this report stated that global inequality is growing, with half the world's wealth now in the hands of just how many? 1% of the population, according to a new report. That is an astounding indication of the economic inequality that we find today. And I broke down to statistics just to get a better conception in my mind as to what that really means. The current world population as of today, January 2016, stands at almost 7.4 billion people. That's a lot of people in the world. So 1% of the current world population is about 73,964,845 plus. It's increasing by each moment. So that means only 73 million people have half the world's wealth, according to this new report, which on balance indicates that more than 7 billion people have to contend with the other 50% of the world's wealth. Do you see the inequality, the lopsidedness, where the wealth is not evenly distributed? Bringing it home to the United States, in a candid conversation with Frank Rich last fall, Chris Rock said, quote, "Oh, people don't even know. I think there's a word there that's missing. If people were to know how rich people are, there would be riots in the streets." And that's what eventually happened in France when the people said enough is enough. This report says the top 20% of US households own more than 84% of the nation's wealth, and the bottom 40% combine for poultry, how much? 0.3%. That's according to the Scientific American, March the 31st, 2015. So again, I did some numbers crunching. I find that the current population of the United States, as it stands of today, is almost 320 million people. So about 20% of the current population, or 64 million Americans, own more than 84% of the nation's wealth. About 40%, or 128 million Americans, only share 0.3% of the nation's wealth. And so the balance is that approximately another 40%, or 128 million, share between themselves the remaining balance of 15.7%. So again, there is a massive lopsidedness, and if there was further time to investigate how much of that top 20% really own that 84% of the Americans' wealth, I think the statistics will even be more staggering. So we see here the bottom tier, which I would think to be the middle class, only shares roughly about 15% of the nation's wealth, and it's been squeezing constantly by the hour each day. So what we saw in France is not unique to that civilization more than 200 to 300 plus years ago. We have it on a global scale here in the 21st century. When there was the global financial meltdown, as I mentioned before, that took place in September 2008, a large percentage of the world's economy was adversely affected to a degree possibly not seen maybe even since the Depression. Former British Prime Minister Mr. Gordon Brown claimed that the present financial disorder may be seen in the future to be, and I quote him, the birth pangs of the new world order. That comes from Sky News in Britain, Remembrance Day 2008. And so since the global economic crisis, there have been calls for the establishment of a new international economic order. Even the Vatican is coming on the scene, calling for the establishment of such an entity. According to Reuters news service, October the 24th, 2011, the Vatican called for the establishment of a global public authority and a central world bank to rule over financial institutions that have become outdated and often ineffective in dealing fairly with crisis. And this has been the theme from the Vatican for many years. Pope urges New World Economic Order. The Vatican calls for world government. Vatican Council calls for world government and central bank. These are established, reputable news sources that are conveying this information to the masses of the world, that the Vatican has an interest in the formation of a new global financial entity. And it sees itself, of course, as the one with the longest experience in world affairs to have a dominant say in the conduct of that organization. The idea of a new global economy has been around for many years, not something that's come up in the 21st century. Here's a statement that comes from, of all places, the ANZ Bank Monthly Summary. I won't ask you who banks for the ANZ here, but you know that's a local bank with Australia. And this is October 1986. The world's economy, the search for mechanisms of transitions. And in this one sentence, this statement reads, the development of the new global economy demands a fundamental realignment of policy-making power away from national government to some as yet undefined institutional order where the traditional nation-state plays a more subordinate role. It was even envisaged at that time, during the time of the Cold War, when communism was still in vogue there in Eastern Europe, that a new entity, a supranational entity, must take precedence over the nation-states of the world in the way the economy is being run in our times. And this is in the process of being developed before our very eyes, with more and more of the financial regulations and indicators being dictated outside of our own respective governments. Another issue that deals with the economic instability and inequality of our times is the growing debt of all nations. I find this to be an extremely interesting admission here. Back in 1981, when the American government debt rose to an unprecedented level at that time of $1 trillion. And President Ronald Reagan, less than 4 weeks after he was sworn in as President of the United States, gave an illustration as to how large the national debt was back then in 1981. A few weeks ago, I called such a figure, $1 trillion, incomprehensible. And I've been trying ever since to think of a way to illustrate how big $1 trillion really is. And the best I could come up with is that if you had a stack of $1,000 bills in your hand, only 4 inches high, you would be a millionaire. $1 trillion would be a stack of $1,000 bills 67 miles high, or converting it to our metric measurements, 107 kilometers high. So can you imagine stacking $1,000 bills from the floor down? You would see up to 107 kilometers in the sky before you reach $1 trillion. But that was the American national debt back in 1981. The United States national debt, this is the government debt as of today, midday today, Friday, January the 22nd, 2016, now reads at $18,906,937,500,000 plus US dollars. How would you like that, to have that in your kitty? You would have to have an enormous one. $18 trillion, almost 19 trillion. Now, would you like to know how much that is converted to New Zealand dollars? I did a conversion here thanks to Google, and I don't know why the figures are so inflated as the way they are, but it works out to over 30 trillion New Zealand dollars. So that is an enormous debt, and that's just the American debt. So as of today, 12 o'clock midday, the American debt, as I mentioned, is almost $19 trillion. The national debt goes up $6 million every 15 minutes. And if you were to stack $1,000 bills from the floor up, the American debt as it stands today would be over 2,200 kilometers high. That is approximately the flying distance from Christchurch to Melbourne, which is around 2,412 kilometers away. These figures are inconceivable to show you how grave the economic crisis is. Now, people say that we have a lot of assets on hand that could pay off the debt. But if that was not a problem, we should have been paying off that debt constantly a long time before the debt has reached such a figure as the United States is now experiencing. And the total American debt, which includes government, business and private, again, as of 12 o'clock today, stands at almost 66 US trillion dollars. Meaning again, stacking $1,000 notes on top of another, the height of the depth would be more than 7,000 kilometers high. So I pose the question, how high can the American debt go before the whole thing topples over? And that's just one country. You combine all the countries of the world together in terms of indebtedness, it has reached a level that we know can never be paid off, let alone, not even the interest, let alone the principal of that debt. So we read in James chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, "Go to now, ye rich men, Weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Verse 3, your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped together treasure together for when? The last days. Now notice, gold and silver don't canker and rust. That's why people buy gold bullion, because of its precious metal. It doesn't rust, but it symbolizes the depreciation of value and worth. Soon money will become as nothingness. And there have been countries around the world over the years where the current currency of the times was just thrown into the streets. It had no worth whatsoever. So we're living at a time of economic instability that will reach the point that will be fulfilled as has been foretold by the Apostle James. What about marriage? You remember that France passed some revolutionary divorce laws in 1792, which was described at that time by historians of those days as a worrisome trend that would contribute to the downgrading of society. Following France's reintroduction of its divorce laws in 1884, reversing the abolition of its first edict in 1803, every country in the world except one has liberalized its marriage annulment laws to reflect in some way the laws that were passed by France in 1792. Malta was the second last country in the world to legislate divorce laws, as recently as 2011. When anyone here has it to guess who the last country is that hasn't got divorce laws? No. It's not too far away from here in the South Pacific, the Philippines. The Philippines is the only country in the world that still does not have divorce laws. But efforts have been underway for quite some years to legislate such laws into action. Now, the Whitlam Labor government in Australia legislated the Family Law Act 1975, which made divorces easier to obtain in that country. One of the chief architects of the Family Law Act 1975 was Senator Lionel Murphy, who was at that time Attorney General during most of the Whitlam Labor government. Professor Manning Clark, a very close friend of Senator Lionel Murphy, the late historian at Melbourne University, he delivered the following tribute on Australian Broadcasting Commission television on the night of the death of Lionel Murphy, who at the time of his passing was a judge on the Australian High Court, October 21, 1986. And this is what he said about the philosophy that underpinned Justice Murphy's public service in Australia. I think we can say now that in this period of what I call turbulent emotionalism, when no one knows what to believe, a period when human beings have lost faith in God's word and the Enlightenment, there was a man in Australia, Lionel Murphy, who passionately believed that the morality of Judeo-Christianity had ceased to be relevant. I see Lionel Murphy as a man who, in that context, strove to end the domination by God over human beings. Maybe you don't get the import of that here in New Zealand, but anybody that comes out with a philosophy, with a viewpoint that the Judeo-Christian values of our society are no longer relevant in our day and age, that the principles of the Bible should no longer be considered for people to live by, then that gives you an idea of what drove Justice Murphy in his time in government to write that divorce law that would secularize marriage and bring it down to a level where anybody now can define what marriage is and how they can enter into it and break from it at their will. You have here also October the 1st, 1981, the New Zealand Family Proceedings Act 1980, which became effective on that date, which made divorces easier to obtain. I find this a very interesting statement that you can find at Yahoo Answers. When divorce was legalized in New Zealand, this was put up on the website 10 years ago, and somebody astutely made this observation. The passing of the Family Proceedings Act marked the final step in the, notice the words, transition from a law which upheld Christian doctrine of marriage as a religious sacrament or ordinance to one which sees it as a social contract subject to the wills of its signatories. It is no longer now firmly established on the biblical model that Christ himself gave in Matthew chapter 19, verses 4 to 6. It has now been taken out of that sacred setting and now it's being redefined according to our own human understanding. And so, it is by natural logic that the term marriage has now been redefined to no longer include one man, one woman united together for a lifetime. Now we have gay marriage. As of this month, 20 countries have signed laws allowing for same-gender marriages. And you know the famous decision that was passed last June by the United States Supreme Court that same-gender marriages are now mandatory across every state of the United States. And now the borders have been extended further to now include polyamorous relationships. This is a bit different from polygamy, where one man marries X number of wives. These relationships involve any number of people from both genders coming together, forming a relationship, and then petitioning the government to recognize that as a union that ought to be confirmed as a marriage by the state. That may seem far-fetched now, just as gay marriages seem to be far-fetched only 20, 30 years before, or less. But there is a movement underway, particularly amongst the young people and those who espouse the postmodernist theology, to allow marriage equality to be extended to include these kind of relationships. I'll give you an example. I'm going to read here a petition that was received in the Australian House of Representatives back in 2013 to recognize polyamorous relationships, or what is also known as multi-member unions. And a statement from the Polyamory Action Lobby based in Sydney, Australia, made this statement, and I quote, "We believe all Australians in loving, consenting relationships deserve the right to be married regardless of the number of partners involved." This is coming. If time was to continue, these kind of relationships will be endorsed by the state in the quest for marriage equality. And then you must ask, where can it go from there? There was an incident in São Paulo, Brazil, where a man and two women entered into a civil partnership as it was described back in 2012. And quoting from the Times of India newspaper, October 5, 2012, I read this report. The three individuals lived in Rio de Janeiro together for 3 years and shared bills and other expenses. The public notary who accepted their union said the man and two women should be entitled to family rights. A website quoted her as saying, notice what she stated, "We are not inventing anything. For better or worse, it doesn't matter. But what we considered a family before isn't necessarily what we would consider a family today." So you redefine marriage, and as a consequence, you have to redefine what a family is, and then in turn, you redefine society. The goal of radical feminism, and I emphasize here the goal of radical feminism, which has been in print for quite some years, is the destruction of the traditional marriage model. I'm just going to read to you a few quotes that have been in print for quite some years, which people have strongly advocated should be the thing that ought to be accomplished in society. Quoting from Kate Millett, one of the most notable feminists of our time, in a book that was published in 1970, Sexual Politics, page 62, this is what she said. A sexual revolution would require, perhaps first of all, an end of traditional sexual inhibitions and taboos, particularly those that threaten patriarchal monogamous marriage, and they include homosexuality, illegitimacy, adolescent pre- and extramarital sexual activity. The sort of practices that used to be once taught by the churches as sin, that used to be regarded as on the fringes of society, have now become the norm. And she says that this must take place in order to destroy the model of a family as comprising of a patriarchal monogamous marriage. And that was back in 1970 when she said these words. Another lady by the name of Vivian Gornick in the Daily Illini, April 25th, 1981. Being a housewife is an illegitimate profession. The choice to serve and be protected and plan towards being a family maker is a choice that shouldn't be. The heart of radical feminism is to change it. Do you see by these words what forces were in play during those years to try to change the concept of what a family is, what marriage should entail, how our society should function? From the Saturday Review, June the 14th, 1975, in an article entitled Sex, Society and the Female Dilemma, I read these words by Simone de Beauvoir. As long as the family and the myth of the family and the myth of maternity and the maternal instinct are not destroyed, women will still be oppressed. No woman should be authorized to stay at home and raise her children. Society should be totally different. Women should not have that choice, precisely because if there is such a choice, too many women will make that one. It is a way of forcing women in a certain direction. You see the forces that have been in play? The forces, I dare say, that shaped the events that led up to the French Revolution are still in current today. Another book called Women, a Journal of Liberation, I think this is a magazine actually, autumn 1969, Function of the Family by Linda Gordon. This is what she says. The nuclear family must be destroyed. They make no bones about it back then. And people must find better ways of living together. Whatever its ultimate meaning, the breakup of families now is an objectively revolutionary process. Families have supported oppression by separating people into small, isolated units, unable to join together to fight for common interests. Dare I dare say that there is not a biblical concept here involved in this, is there not? The idea that we should break up families and live totally different to what we live now is not a Christian concept. Another statement, Sisterhood is Powerful, page 537. We can't destroy the inequities between men and women until we destroy marriage. Now, all these years later, some feminists and some who have advocated these positions have reconsidered and reevaluated in light of the declining situation that's taken place in society, the breakdown of the social fabric. And one lady was bold enough in London to admit her error and to admit something that had been missing from all those statements we have just read. This comes from the Daily Mail in London, January the 3rd, 2013, where it says, this is the opening sentences of this news report, feminism is partly to blame for the breakdown of the family, one of Labour's most senior female politicians has said. Diana Abbott, the party's public health spokesman, said that major issues facing society stem from family breakdown. Is that not true? And in a surprise admission from one of the left's most outspoken feminists, she conceded that women's rights campaigners have neglected the family. But she said the left had to recognize that some of the biggest public health issues stem from family breakdown, explaining, quote, "Doctors say to me that so many of the drug and alcohol problems they see stem from family difficulties." So this grand experiment that was made and pronounced from the sexual revolution of the 60s and the early 70s to break up the family, destroy marriage, has had awful consequences for our society. It hasn't made things better, it's only made things worse. And this is reflected more and more by impartial observers of our society today, such as this particular person here from a British newspaper, quoted in the Australian newspaper of 2013. "Marriage, that is true marriage, a man and a woman, united for a lifetime, is becoming, notice, a minority lifestyle in today's Britain. And the consequences of this are miserable for many children who are forced to grow up amid a confusing set of adults, all busy with their own desires and relationships. A typical childhood in modern Britain involves being born to unmarried parents, then one of the parents marrying, then that marriage breaking up, then a new relationship being formed. No wonder kids are confused." What is the greatest strength of society? That of a sound, cohesive family unit. And now that is starting to be recognized belatedly as the only thing that can stop it from society breaking up and disintegrating altogether. From the Daily Mail newspaper, December 7th, 2010, half of all children today will see their parents split up before the age of 16, according to a shocking study of Broken Britain. And that is an apt term, Broken Britain. Any society where the families are disintegrating at such a rate is indeed a broken country. Notwithstanding all the technological advancements, a sound, loving family home is the bedrock of society. And all the ancient civilizations that have crashed upon the dust heaps of history have fallen because of the breakdown of the home. There are many reasons why families break up. One of the contributing factors, I believe, is a rejection of Christian principles and values. That there is no sense of purpose or certainty within the family unit. We live in an age of postmodernism today. And postmodernism can be defined in very simple terms as follows: lack of absolute truth. The only absolute is there are no absolutes. That's what they say. Number 2, uncertainty and skepticism about definite facts. And number 3, restructure of concepts to offer new meanings. Classic example, marriage. The lack of Christian values and principles is also seen and reflected in the way power is being administered in our world. And I'm going to read to you here, this is from an established open statement regarding the power that is potentially at play and can be used any time as seen fit. The American president has the power to seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, call reserve forces to duty, institute martial law. Seize and control all means of transportation, regulate all private enterprise, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all Americans. Most of these laws remain a potential source of virtually unlimited power for a president should he choose to activate them. It is possible that some future president could exercise this vast authority in an attempt to place the United States under authoritarian rule. That was the Special Senate Committee report on executive powers back in November 1973. It shows that dictatorial powers are not only within the domain of totalitarian governments. Even Western governments can incorporate principles that go beyond the boundaries set by English common law. Even in little Fiji, a country less than 1 million people, they have decrees on the statute books that do not allow people to seek redress for any hurt or harm that may be inflicted by laws that are enforced by the constabulary. In this instance, Public Order Decree 2012 prevents people from assembling together in mass gatherings, in congregations, on the streets, and should anyone be hurt, if the police was to come and break up their group, they have no means to petition the government for redress. These principles do not embody English common law, but Roman law. Even in laws that have been passed by Australia, the Sydney Morning Herald, October 16, 2005, police state fears over terrorism laws. Australia is moving towards a police state with harsh anti-terrorism laws that could be pushed through Parliament too quickly, the Law Council of Australia says. And some of the concerns expressed by the Law Council of Australia more than 10 years ago include the following features of this piece of legislation that was passed back then: that suspects can be held in secret preventative detention. Suspects, mind you. 5 years jail if suspects held without charge reveal that they are in custody. And 5 years jail for a relative of a person held in custody if the relative finds out and tells someone else. Contact between lawyers and suspects monitored by police, and house arrest for suspicious persons for up to 1 year. Some of these provisions sound very much like that of the Inquisition, where you are suspected on something and now you have to prove your innocence. Whereas English common law states that you are innocent until proven guilty. We've moved away from English common law to that of Roman law, and the effects are not good upon society. We also have the influence of secret societies that are in play today. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy nonsense that's out there, but there's also enough of authentic evidence to suggest that these societies not only exist, but are exerting their powers behind the scenes to shape and to mold public affairs. Like the Bilderberg group that meets virtually every year in secret, attended by some of the highest people of the world's power structure. Skull and Bones, another secret society operating there in the United States. In the 2004 presidential election, both presidential candidates were members of this secret society. And then we have the Illuminati that we referred to in part 1, that was established by Adam Weishaupt in 1776. It goes by various names in different places around the world. And here is a photo of a record album that was produced back in the 60s, exposing the workings of this society in the United States. And there have been other entities like the Trilateral Commission that was established by David Rockefeller in 1973. Actually before 1973, because Senator Barry Goldwater in his book With No Apology stated about this society as saying, the Trilateral Commission is intended to be the vehicle for multinational consolidation of the commercial and banking interests by seizing control of the political government of the United States. The Trilateral Commission represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power: political, monetary, intellectual, and ecclesiastical. Interesting, the religious aspect too. What the Trilateral Commission intends is to create a worldwide economic power superior to the political governments of the nation-states involved. As managers and creators of the system, they will what? Rule the future. What's happening in the nations of this world is being dictated by forces outside of our own control and say. There's a lot more that can be said about all of those factors we've just covered. We're coming to a time, as is recorded in Luke chapter 21, verse 26, that men's hearts are failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. We're reaching a climax. We're reaching a crisis point. We're reaching the threshold of some tremendous events that will take place that will totally change our world. And Jesus himself has foretold of these times, and he stated in Matthew chapter 24, 21 and 22, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of this world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened." We read in Luke chapter 21, verse 31, "So likewise ye, when ye shall see these things come to pass, know ye that the kingdom of God is" what? "Nigh at hand." So as we've looked in the time that we've had available to us to look at what has happened in the past, in the trends and developments that led up to and including the French Revolution, and see some of the parallels that are taking place before our eyes today, how can we stand in this present generation? We're given the clarion call and admonition by the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 13, verses 11 and 12, "And that, knowing the time, that now it is" what? "High time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation" what? "Nearer," not further away, "nearer than when we believe. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Let us therefore" what? "Cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light." We have some action to do. We have something to implement. We are to watch, Jesus says, and what? Pray always, that we will not be caught unawares. We are to study the prophecies that foretell of the developments and of the things that are taking place before our eyes today, as Jesus himself gave the blessing in Revelation chapter 1, verse 3, "Blessed is he that" what? "Readeth, and they that" what? "Hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand." There is a triple blessing on those who read, those who hear, and those who keep the words of this prophecy. And the book of Revelation, particularly the last part of the book, the last half of the book, pertains to our time in which we live today. We are to be students of God's word so we can intelligently know where we are in the stream of time, and we can intelligently communicate that message and knowledge to the world that Jesus is coming again, and that very soon. Our focus and direction, of course, should be upon Christ. But Christ bids us to watch and pray. Like the 300 in Gideon's army, they were focused on lapping up the water, but they kept their eye on the enemy. We are to keep our eye upon Christ, and Christ foremost, but at the same time be aware of what is taking place around us, because Jesus says, "Blessed are they that hear, that read, and keep the words of this prophecy." John 12:32, "And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me." There is a work to be done as we're drawn towards Christ. It does something to our life, to our character. It changes us. It brings us into conformity to the will of God, as expressed in his holy law. "For this is the will of God, even your sanctification." 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 3. And the law of God embodies the principles that will be for our greatest value and help and happiness here in this world. That's why we're admonished by the Apostle Paul in Romans 6:13, "Neither yield ye your members as instruments of unrighteousness unto sin, but what? Yield or surrender yourselves unto whom? God. And your members as instruments of what? Righteousness unto God. God is calling for us for a complete turnaround from our way of living to reflect the principles of his holy law. And we are to be of good courage, even in these times in which we live. As we read in Romans 8:35, 38 and 39, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Who? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? For I am persuaded, the Apostle Paul said, that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor death, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. What a promise. Christ is there to be with his people all the way. He says, lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. He says, be of good cheer, for I have what? Overcome the world. God is in control, but he's allowing the powers that be to play out their part in this great controversy for yet a little longer. And when the climax has been reached, then he will come to save them, his people, as his own. I want to leave with you with a beautiful thought that if we have been affected by the trends and the developments in this world, stemming from a repeat of what happened up to and including the French Revolution, and all the changing morals that have come since that time, and all the changing ideas about anything, brethren and sisters, that we used to hold as Bible truth, Christ still bids us hope to come to him, and he will change us and make us whole. None are so low, so corrupt and vile, that they cannot find in Jesus, who died for them, strength, purity, and righteousness, if they will put away their sins, cease their course of iniquity, and turn with full purpose of heart to the living God. He is waiting to strip them of their garments, stained and polluted by sin, and to put upon them the white, bright robes of righteousness, and he bids them what? Live and not die. In him they may flourish. Their branches will not wither nor be fruitless. If they abide in him, they can draw sap and nourishment from him, be imbued with his spirit, walk even as he walked, overcome as he overcame, and be exalted to his own right hand. What a promise. And it's all established in the scriptures, that I can do all things through Christ who strengtheneth me. The sun is setting on this world's history. We are truly on the borders of eternity. We're coming to that point in this world's history when it shall be recreated anew, that they shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. And praise God for the promise that affliction shall not rise up the second time. God's true world will be a world of equity, of love, of brotherhood, of peace, harmony, and happiness, because the inhabitants of the world will be established on the principles of God's holy law, the foundation of his government, and a reflection of his pure and holy character. And we can be like Jesus, wherever we may be, and allow God to put his law in our hearts and lives and reflect that to the world, that the world may see a difference, not the changeable, varying circumstances and values of this world, but the unchanging, timeless, eternal verities of God's kingdom, for God is love. Are you ready for Jesus to come again? I pray that we will seek to be ready, so that when he comes, we may say, lo, this is our God. We have waited for him, and he will save us. Let us kneel as we close in prayer. Our gracious, kind Heavenly Father, as we come bowed before Thee this afternoon, as we've seen only a tiny glimpse of the prophetic significance of the developments that are taking place as a repeat of the trends that took place prior to and including the French Revolution, we see that we are reliving history under different circumstances today. We see, dear Father, that the lessons that we ought to learn from the mistakes of the past aren't being heeded, and thus we're repeating the same mistakes in our present day. We see, dear Father, how things are climaxing towards a pinnacle, how things are developing towards a time, as Jesus himself says, there shall be a time of trouble such as this world has never before seen. But we thank you, dear Lord, for the message of hope that you will intervene with the coming of Jesus in the clouds of heaven. We thank you, Lord, that as the Bibles were promulgated and circulated after the revolution, as people saw the dire effects of abandoning God's law, that we praise God that the last message of warning and mercy shall be given to this world, that God's truth will be expounded and proclaimed with a power never before seen, that people may be called, dear Father, to take heed to the gospel message. For when this gospel shall be preached to all the world, then shall the end come. We pray that you'll bless us, Father, as we seek to be like Jesus. Help us, Lord, in our lives where we know we need to overcome. We pray for the presence of the Holy Spirit to abide with us continually, to comfort us, to guide us, to correct us, to reprove us, to admonish us and lead us in the ways that lead to everlasting life. May we be humble and teachable enough, dear Lord, to receive this instruction, and may we have hearts that are touched by the love of God to share it with others, that other people may be blessed with that truth and may be set free by that truth, for it is only the truth that can set us free. Thank you, Lord, for the gift of prophecy. Thank you, Lord, for your scriptures. Thank you for the plan of salvation. Thank you that we can have a choice and the free will to make our decision to follow you, dear Lord, and to serve you each and every day. Bless this encampment. Bless the rest of the speakers who will give their messages to us. Bless everybody who shall attend these meetings. We pray and ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
The presentation you've just been watching is available on DVD from autumnleaves.co.nz or by calling 03 313 7762.